So after 3 years of high performance on his job, Khalid was up for promotion. Midway through his evaluation period, Layla was hired as his new supervisor. After about a month, Khalid started noticing small things. They started to bother him. For example, Layla seemed to be kind of ignoring him when they passed in the hallway. She wouldn't speak. More than once when they were in an elevator together, Layla was either focused on her cell phone or talking to someone who was with her and never acknowledging Khalid. Khalid also discovered that he had not been included in any of these luncheon meetings that Layla had been hosting with various members of the departments to get to know them. And for some reason, Khalid did not receive the memo for the quarterly corporate meeting that he usually attended. When Khalid scheduled a meeting with Layla to discuss the missed corporate meeting, Layla attended the meeting and then abruptly had to leave after they could have the conversation. Discussion never happened. Khalid feels bullied, but is he? It's his experience that Layla yells at him, talks in a louder voice to him relative to other people, dismisses his ideas when they're in meetings, and she always checks her phone and texts messages when he's talking to her or when he's talking in meetings when they are with other people, or even when they're just the two of them. So, is this bullying? And if it is, what should be done? If not, what should be done? See, workplace bullying is a term that describes a persistent and systemic pattern of aggression in the workplace, usually by a supervisor or a peer with power, authority, social clout. The bully or bullies may use overt or covert tactics such as verbal, nonverbal, emotional, and psychological abuse. Specific examples include personal attacks, humiliation, innuendo, and deliberate isolation of a colleague. An act of inequality and discrimination is also categorized as workplace bullying. Workplace bullying causes traumatic, health-related harm to the people who are targets of the bullying. It affects the social and cultural climate of the organization, and it costs the organization in the bottom line, finances, productivity, performance. Workplace bullying has been identified as one of the major contemporary challenges for the occupational health and safety and linked to in workplaces, and is linked to other emerging risks such as work-related stress and violence. So what is bullying? It can be sarcasm, condescension, name-calling, public belittling, taunting, criticizing, and teasing, withholding of resources, singling people out in negative ways, shouting, and intimidation. How common is it? 96% of employees have experienced incivility in their organization. 60% of employees report stress due to incivility at work. 35% of employees report being bullied at work. And 80% of employees believe incivility is a problem throughout their organization. I'm an organizational and behavioral economist with 20 years working in the personnel and human resource management field, supervising managers and supervisors, training and developing them, and empowering workplaces for all people to flourish and thrive. I lead diversity and inclusion training and have created and implemented programs in the corporate space to enable managers and executives to create respectful workplaces. Did you know the percentage of bullies who have targeted a particular person ongoingly for more than a year is 89%? 54% of workplace bullies have been bullying for more than 5 years. 80% of bullies wind up negatively affecting at least 5 or more coworkers. 62% of bullying activity at work primarily involves sabotaging other people's work or reputations. And only 4% of coworkers saw assault or physical intimidation as the primary form of bullying. But psychological intimidation was noted 52% of the time. And bosses make up the majority of bullies. So, workplace bullying, all that I just shared, has an effect on productivity. Every target of bullying may lose up to 200 hours of productivity annually. If that targeted employee is taking sick leave or vacation time, it could be 400 hours of lost production to the employer. 20% of recent survey responders reported that workplace bullying costs them upwards of 7 hours a week. In Australia, as an example, the financial cost of workplace bullying was estimated to be as high as $13 billion. Bullying in the workplace, estimated in UK, 18 billion pounds a year. From sickness-related absences as a result of bullying, staff turnover, and reductions in productivity. The possible effects of workplace bullying. Let's keep in mind Khalid and Layla from our early example. There may be both physical and mental effects. According to experts, if someone like Khalid is being bullied, they may experience actual physical symptoms, sick and anxious, digestive issues, high blood pressure, maybe problems with diabetes, trouble sleeping, trouble focusing, headaches, decreased appetite. The psychological impact of bullying can vary from person to person, but common symptoms include the person in Khaled's position thinking and worrying about work constantly, even when not at work, dreading work, wanting to stay home, needing time off to recover from stress, losing interest in things outside of work, increased risk for depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, low self-esteem, self-doubt, and wondering if you're imagining the bullying. The opportunity for you as a participant in the course is to become knowledgeable of examples and issues related to bullying in the workplace and to be equipped with solutions to be able to stop it or prevent it. So, one of the key things about bullying in the workplace, it takes strong leadership and courageous people to stop or prevent bullying in the workplace and to notice behavior that could lead to bullying. Most of what happens in the workplace is the bystander syndrome. People observe the inappropriate behavior and pretend not to see it. They say nothing, they hope it goes away. The offender is free to operate, the victims are paralyzed. When people are not practiced at speaking up, being the upstander rather than the bystander, they fail to take action when it's needed the most. When bullying occurs, there are several key points. Stop it, interrupt it, report it, document it. Key findings in what will make the difference, whether you're the person being bullied or whether you're observing someone being bullied. It is critical, and it does take people courage in the workplace. It's very easy to be the bystander. When employees participate in training and development like this course, their ability to have difficult conversations, practice being in communication versus being silent, and have experience in what to say, they can be empowered to take action and solve problems. Now, what is the way to win? To beat the bully is to understand what bullying is, where it comes from, and how to respond. Diversity and inclusion training is designed to do just that, so you can create a respectful and sustain a respectful workplace. Training all staff to have heightened sensitivity to and awareness of bullying and other inappropriate behavior and to communicate executive policy is critical. People need to know where to go, what to say, and to whom if they see something inappropriate. Then they have to have the courage to actually take that action. Training managers and supervisors for their role in being proactive and equipped to be responsive then creates the safe space for all employees. See, workplace bullying must be confronted. A quick rule of thumb is to begin documenting the behaviors that lead to the conclusion that bullying is happening in your workplace, keeping track of date, time, and other details. And if you're someone who's observing something that looks like bullying, you also want to have the courage to speak to the person you think is being bullied. Organizations should have a written policy regarding diversity and inclusion, which could incorporate clear language about what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior of engaging in such behavior. Additional guidance for employees to know what to do, where to go, have staff trained to respond to the issues when the employee, the complainant, shows up, is also a critical part of having a respectful workplace and having people be clear about being inclusive and value the component of diversity and inclusion and be successful at it. Most employers fail to properly prepare staff to receive complaints or concerns about bullying or inappropriate behavior. And so even if you have people courageous enough to step up and speak up and say, I think I see something, if the person they're speaking to isn't equipped to respond or takes the information and does nothing with it, that does not help. And it encourages the victimization to continue and the suppression and the silence to continue. The enterprise is at risk, not only for a culture of fear and intimidation that hinders productivity and performance, but also for the high cost of sick leave, absenteeism, and supervisory problems that naturally arise. So what are we talking about really? Let's get into some specifics because we want to look at what's Layla doing? Is she bullying? There's blatant bullying and there's passive aggressive bullying. The blatant form usually comes from those in the supervisor role. An employee, a peer can also practice this. They may yell or scream at employees or try to use fear to manage them. Many of these bullies believe they'll receive little to no consequence since they're in the higher ranking position. And a lot of people who do this behavior don't necessarily see it as bullying. It's just part of being in that leadership role. I'm in charge. I get to be who I want to be and do what I want to do. But blatantly insulting, the bully attempts to establish dominance or control, usually making people feel smaller in order to feel good and important about themselves. The question is, are you and your colleagues trained to respond to this behavior? It's a very uncomfortable situation. It is highly appropriate to interrupt the behavior and isolate the person who's the offender. And it's difficult for a lot of people if it's their boss. Speaking privately to them about the inappropriate nature of the behavior is a pathway. Do you know how to do this? What to say? We teach you this and practice this in our 3-day course. So examples of blatant bullying: using aggressive or intimidating attitude, abusing or threatening to abuse an employee, screaming or using profane language, giving constant, unwanted, unproductive criticism to an employee. So, is Layla bullying? Let's look at the passive aggressive bully. This might be Layla. These bullies make comments that may seem like compliments, but they're hidden insults. Good job on the presentation. You did surprisingly well. Some passive aggressive bullies may unintentionally harm others by using sarcastic statements without realizing they're insulting people. Other forms of passive aggressive bullying include spreading rumors or gossiping about an employee, purposefully excluding an employee, undermining an employee's work, giving employees deadlines that are overwhelming and seem impossible to meet, keeping important information from an employee. So listen, we're living in an era where the relationship between employee and employer has been challenged for months and months in terms of COVID, the lockdown, working from home, and other key factors, and transitioning back to working in person in the office versus working from home. Stress levels are higher than normal, resources tend to be lower, and we still have economic demands to add to all that. There's an experience of pressure. Creating and sustaining a safe and respectful environment in the workplace matters not only to the health and safety and well-being of people, but to that bottom line of revenue generation, productivity, and profitability. So, What are we going to do about Khalid? When employees like Khalid are not taken care of, when they don't feel like they have a safe place to go, they do turn inward. They can become a danger to themselves or others. At the very least, he's going to become unproductive. At the worst, suicidal, homicidal, depending on the duration of the abuse and other factors. Additionally, other employees' well-being and productivity can be harmed if the problems with Khalid and Layla are not resolved. The work environment becomes toxic really quickly, and many individuals can be demoralized even if they have not been spoken to directly or have no involvement in how it's going. People can become disempowered, and other people besides Khalid can become isolated, unproductive. It's common and costly to ignore the situations like Khalid's. Hope he should, goes away. Let's not speak of this. Let's talk about positive things. Ways of thinking like this typically come from the ill-informed and the untrained individual. People don't want to be uncomfortable. Do not be this person. See, what's available is a respectful workplace where you learn how to create the space, practice being available and in communication and reporting. So one of the key things that we want to make sure that people are focused on here is that it is important to have conversations. It is appropriate for someone other than Khalid or Layla to come to Khalid and say, hey, I just noticed you were excluded. Are you okay? Anything going on with you? That is a proactive step that has you be the upstander. It's also the case that people, like all employees getting some sensitivity, training, awareness could empower the person in Khalid's position to speak up for himself. So the critical factor in all of this and the way to beat the bully is to be that upstander, the person who speaks up rather than be the bystander who's watching it all go by, hoping it all goes away, and expect somebody else to deal with it. Our training and development on diversity and inclusion allows you the practice, the experience of being the upstander rather than the bystander. And there are a couple key factors that we provide in that course. One is an understanding of how to make sure your enterprise has the resources in place, the written policies and guidance, the people in the positions. Who in the HR department can Khalid go to speak confidentially and privately about what's happening to him? Does Khalid know where to go and who to talk to and how to approach it? Do all employees know that? Do all employees know what to do about Khalid's situation? If I'm watching this and I've talked to Khalid, he says he's okay, but I don't think he really is. Where do I go? What do I do? Thank you for listening and participating in this webinar.
So Pam, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to do this with us. And honestly, to those watching today, if you want to learn more from Pam, she did mention that she has courses coming up. So you should book soon. She's a very busy woman. And these courses are incredibly exciting. So now I would just like to take some time to do some Q&A. And Pam, do forgive me for the first two rather difficult questions. And just a reminder to post any questions that you might have in the chat and we will address those. So the first question, from the story you shared with us, it seems like Khalid is looking at things from a certain perspective. So maybe he was just attached to his last boss and doesn't accept Layla as his new boss. Could I ask your insights into this, how this might make him feel like he's in the situation that he's in?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Louise. And Yeah, I think the key thing is college kind of got to be responsible for his experience and be in communication. It is quite possible in some cases that I'm just used to the boss I had. College. I think with the scenario we said he's been there 5 years, and so for the last 4 years and 10 months he's had somebody else, and he's starting a new relationship with someone, and he's as a new supervisor, and he's got to manage that relationship. What really matters is that the person in college position has the courage and the willingness to speak up and be in communication about what his experience is. Ideally, it's to Layla. Ideally, it's something to be able to set in a private meeting, say, hey, I just want to be in communication. I don't know if you're aware of it, but when you do this, it occurs to me that you're yelling at me. What's your experience? Are you aware of it? Now, that's the easiest way to manage it. It's a new relationship. You've got to create kind of agreements, create understanding, and get used to one another. However, there is a federal law in the UAE. Article 374 of the federal law number 3 says if there is raised voices, abusive treatment, verbal abuse, yelling at an employee, and a third party is there, that is a clear violation of that law, and there's a penalty. The opportunity is, if that's college experience and he's in communication and doesn't feel like he has a recourse with Layla, he can report that to the Ministry of Human Resources and to his employer. It's expected that he communicate that to his employer. Another key thing about college experience is whether it's a pattern of sustained behavior. We did in our scenario mention Layla's been there just a month. So there is a context for how this is going. Again, what's required most is people be in communication about it.
Absolutely. And I do think it's very valuable, for people to know that they need to set those boundaries and to know that, the law is something that is there to support them and just have that awareness of what is there for them. And to follow on from that, even if Khalid is bullied, if he speaks up, don't you think it would get worse? So Layla could just retaliate and then it would just make the situation even more miserable?
It could. It absolutely could. And in that case, the guidance, both documenting what's happening when it's happening and who else is there when it's happening, is a critical factor for Khalid to start to protect himself and be proactive. Being able to say, I was in this meeting on, Monday the 5th at this time, and here were the 4 people in the meeting with me. Layla yelled at me, raised her voice at me, and then here's the 3 other meetings that happened after that. The same thing happened, and here are the people involved. That kind of documentation, and it doesn't have to take long, then it allows Khalid to go and take action. Now, it does rely on the enterprise, the company he works for, having a policy about this that they're willing to enforce. So it's always the case that people with anti-harassment policies in the workspace have a no retaliation clause typically with it that says people should feel free to report what's happening to them and have the trust and faith that management will take appropriate actions and be responsible for, like, counseling Layla, giving maybe a verbal warning or a written warning, depending on how egregious the behavior is, and also ensuring Khalid has a pathway to come back and say, hey, look what she did to, she's done this, this, and this after I made my complaint. So there's most organizations do have an anti-harassment policy that addresses this, and they do have an anti-retaliation policy that addresses this. And so you want strong managers. You want strong executive leadership that says our workforce matters. We will protect our workforce and create a safe environment. And then as long as they're saying that, have the policy to match and train their managers to take the appropriate actions when the complaints arise.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I'll now start to take some questions from the audience. So we have a question from Adriana. So how can you have a proper discussion with someone who is always thinking that they have power over all of the other staff?
Great question, Adriana. Thank you. I think the most critical thing is being able to start a conversation with that person in a safe space and kind of setting up the intention of the conversation. Say, hey, I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about how my experience is in the workplace with you. Would you be willing to have that conversation? Would you be willing to listen? And to be able to say in a respectful manner, and I can tell as I'm saying this now, I worked a lot in my seminars with people who, kind of takes coaching and practice to be able to do this, but to say, when you say this or when you do this, my experience is whatever. I feel dominated. I feel suppressed. And I'm just wondering, do you know that this is happening? Or if I could make you aware of this is happening, could we talk about alternative ways of being? Now, that's the best case scenario. And the person is open to listen and to understand that their behavior is having this impact and willing to be responsible for the behavior and change it. This is certainly the ideal scenario. Some people just aren't fully aware of who they're being and how it impacts other people. And the opportunity to start that conversation and have it firsthand one-on-one is always a really great opportunity.
Great, thank you. And we have another one from Jotham. So workplace bullying is also not carried out just by supervisors and superiors alone, but also by co-workers who might not even know that they're doing it. Do you change the situation or do you change the person?
Yeah, great. Well, if it's your peer, I don't know how you change that person. Now, what you could do is contribute to that person. So a lot of times, and we deal with this in the inclusion side of our diversity and inclusion training, people have natural cliques. There's, especially for those of us who are kind of back in person full time in the workplace. We have people, we go to coffee with these people every day, or we go for our smoke break outside every day. So we have natural kind of cliques, the person that we chat to at their desk every morning when we come in, or whatever like that. And so sometimes people are just doing what they do and they're not aware, especially peers, they're not necessarily aware that in their social relationships at work, there could be what typically is the case is exclusion. Someone or one's feeling excluded, isolated, not included. And that those people who feel excluded usually as a function of diversity may look and say, well, I'm being excluded because I'm this. And then there's a whole experience that person's having in the world of, for me, I'm an African American living here in the UAE. I'm being excluded because I'm an African American, and it's because I'm a woman, or it's because of this, because of that. The opportunity is to speak up, again, be the upstander, whether it's for yourself or whether you're in the clique. You want to notice who's excluded, who doesn't have a clique, who should you invite to coffee that you never go to coffee with. And if you're the person feeling excluded, the first opportunity is simply to ask, may I join you for coffee? That kind of thing takes courage, but it also, we do our training so people can be aware, both for myself, am I concluding I'm being excluded based on some attribute about myself, and I have no factual basis for it. I have no idea that it's true. So the opportunity on both sides is for people to be in communication and for people to break their patterns. Be willing to break your everyday pattern. Be willing to reach out and have a social engagement with someone in the office that you don't normally have a social engagement with. Be willing to notice who is it that is actively engaged in your teams and your projects and who's not. And speak up about it. Make invitations, make requests, and if necessary, involve a manager as well.
That's brilliant. I think just that communication and just making sure that you're checking on the people around you is really, really important.
Yes.
We have time for one more question. So we're going to go for this one because I would love your opinion on whether you think bullied people become bullies. How common would you say that is?
It is common, although it's typically a pattern from people's past when they were younger. So it is often the case that people in the workplace have brought patterns and ways of being that they've had for 10, 20 years, and yes, research and studies show those individuals, when they were younger and were bullied, take on that behavior as adults. That is typical. Now, in the workplace, it's not typical that if I'm newly bullied, I turn around and become one, as much as if it's just the way I became in life, then I had that pattern and that habit. And the key thing here is to recognize that people always have the opportunity to contribute to one another if they're willing to be the upstander. Now, the other part of that question kind of deals with, there's a difference between I'm having stress at home and frustration, or I feel powerless at home and I take it out at work. We do see that. We do. And sometimes that case, everybody's getting kind of mistreated because I'm the manager at work, but at home I'm being mistreated by my spouse. So at work I come in like just because I can, or because I'm letting off steam. It's still not appropriate. And to some extent, it doesn't matter too much where the bullying is coming from, whether it's from your past 20 years ago or from your past like last night. What's most critical is that people be made aware that their behavior's not appropriate for the respectful workplace, and be given an opportunity to make correction. And then if the correction's not made, more severe options should be used.
Excellent. So again, I just want to thank you so much, Pam, for this. It was absolutely brilliant. We do hope that all of our listeners enjoyed as much as I did. For those of you who do want to learn more, please reach out. As we mentioned, she does have some training sessions coming up in the next few weeks. So Pam, any final thoughts, any final words that you would like to share before we end today?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just thank you for all those who are with us today and watching, and who may watch this recording in the future. My commitment is that employees and employers are thriving in the workplace, and that's what I devote my time and attention to. I encourage everyone to take the opportunity to become that upstander, not the bystander. And it does take leadership and courage, and I invite us to be that kind of person in our workspaces, to honor and contribute to our fellow employees and outside the workplace too. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share this today.
Absolute pleasure. So thank you so much, and we will see you all soon. Take care. See you later, Pam.
Bye. Thank you.